The winter night pressed heavy on a small town street, the kind of silence that made even the wind sound lonely. A little girl no older than 8 sat shivering on the steps of a run-down house, clutching a stuffed bear missing an eye. Her sweater was too thin, her shoes torn, her breath breaking into clouds of frost. Behind the wheel of a passing patrol car, Officer Mark Hanlon might have dismissed her as another runaway, except his German shepherd Duke wouldn't stop staring. Dog's low whine cut through the heater's hum, a sound that always meant more than the officer wanted to believe. What Duke sensed on that freezing night was not just a lost child, but the unraveling of a secret meant to stay buried, one that would expose betrayal, greed, and the fight for a little girl's life. If you believe in courage like Duke's, subscribe. And join us for this story. The streets were nearly deserted, lined with dark porches and brittle trees swaying against the winter sky. Mark slowed the cruiser as his headlights washed across a crumbling house at the corner of Willow Lane. That's where he saw her, knees tucked to her chest, a stuffed bear clenched so tightly it seemed like her only shield. She didn't look up when he parked, didn't move even when the red hazard lights flashed across her pale face. In the back seat, Duke lifted his head, ears pricked, a low whine turning sharp as a single bark. Mark stepped out into the bite of cold air, his boots crunching on frozen pavement. His voice was steady, professional, stripped of emotion. "Hey, are you hurt?" The girl's head tilted just enough for him to catch the dirt streaked across her cheek, the cracked skin on her lips. She clutched the bear tighter, her silence louder than any cry. Duke leapt from the cruiser when Mark opened the back door. The German shepherd's movements were slow, deliberate, tail level, head low, every step calibrated to reassure. He paused at the girl's side, sniffed her trembling hand, then pressed his warm body against her legs. She didn't speak, but her small fingers slipped from the bear to grip his fur, holding on as if he were the only solid thing in her collapsing world. Mark went back to the trunk, pulled a thermal blanket, and placed it gently across her lap. She hesitated, then wrapped it around herself, the crackle of fabric loud in the frozen quiet. He crouched, lowering himself to her level. "My name's Officer Hanlon. This is Duke. We'll get you somewhere warm." She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Duke's steady breathing seemed to calm her more than words ever could. Mark straightened, radioed dispatch. Unit 12. Found juvenile female, approximately 8 years old. No visible injuries. Hypothermia risk. Transporting. His tone was clipped, routine. But when he glanced back, Duke was nudging the girl's hand again, and she had buried her face into his fur like a child hugging the only family she trusted. He opened the car door. Duke climbed in first, stretching across the seat to make room for her. After a long pause, the girl slid down from the steps and followed, cautious but drawn to the dog's steady presence. She curled against him, the blanket slipping off her shoulders as she pressed her face deeper into his coat. Mark closed the door, stood still for a moment, then slid behind the wheel. The heater kicked in, fogging the windshield edges. He caught her reflection in the rearview mirror, eyes open, but softer now, clinging to Duke. For him it was another case, another report. But the way she held that dog told him this was anything but routine. The ride to the station was quiet, broken only by the hum of tires and the girl's shallow breathing as she clung to Duke. Every so often, the shepherd turned his head, rushing, his nose against her arm, grounding her in a way no human words could. Mark kept his eyes on the road, but his mind kept circling the same question. Why was she outside in the dead of winter, and why hadn't anyone come looking? At the precinct, paramedics met them at the door. They tried to coax her with soft voices and promises of hot chocolate, but she wouldn't let go of Duke. She stepped inside only because the dog led the way. His harness strap clenched in her small hand. They settled her in an interview room, blankets still wrapped around her shoulders. A female officer brought cocoa, steam rising from the cup, but the girl only stared at it. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked like breaking glass. "Don't let them take me back." Mark leaned forward, careful not to crowd her. "Who, sweetheart?" Her eyes darted to the door, then back to Duke. She whispered into his ear first, as though he could translate. Finally, she looked at Mark, the people in the house. Mark's gut tightened. "Is that where you live?" She shook her head quickly, clutching Duke tighter. "Not my home. They said I had to stay there. That no one wanted me, but—" Her voice faltered, and she buried her face against the shepherd's neck. Mark glanced at Sarah Keene, the child services investigator who had just stepped in. Sarah's expression hardened instantly. She had seen enough cases to recognize coercion when she heard it. "Can you tell me your name?" Sarah asked gently. The girl hesitated, then whispered, "Emily." Duke shifted, settling closer against her. As if sealing the truth with his presence. Sarah exchanged a look with Mark. "We'll need to check the property she was at. If what she's saying is true, this isn't just neglect. It could be organized." Mark nodded, jaw tight. He had dealt with runaways, abusive households, kids shuffled between foster homes, but this felt different. The fear in Emily's eyes wasn't of a parent's temper or a stranger's cruelty. It was deeper, structured, as if she had been conditioned to keep quiet. Duke's ears pricked suddenly, his gaze fixed on the hallway. Mark followed his stare and caught sight of a man loitering near the entrance. Clean suit, polished shoes, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the room like he owned it. When he noticed Mark watching, he turned briskly and left. Mark stood, adrenaline spiking. Who the hell was that? Sarah frowned. "He doesn't belong here." Mark looked back at Emily. She had seen the man too. Her grip on Duke's fur turned white-knuckled. Her whisper was almost too soft to hear. "That's them. Don't let him take me back." Duke growled, low and steady, a sound that rumbled like a warning through the sterile room. The next morning, a winter sun tried to warm the frost that clung to the station windows, but inside, tension hung heavier than the cold. Mark hadn't slept. Neither had Duke, who refused to leave Emily's side, stretched across the bench like a living shield. Every time someone walked past the glass, Emily stiffened, her small hand burrowing deeper into the shepherd's fur. Detective Sarah Keene entered with a folder tucked under her arm. Her face was grim. "That house on Willow Lane? It's not just a random property. It's owned by a shell company, one that's tied to 3 other addresses in the county. Foster contracts, child care payments, government checks. On paper, they're caring for kids. In reality, it looks like they're trading them." Mark swore under his breath. He looked at Emily, still wrapped in the oversized blanket, eyes shut, but not asleep. "She's proof," he said. "And she's terrified they'll take her back." Sarah dropped the folder on the table. Inside were photographs, neglected houses, identical paperwork signed by different names. Patterns that screamed of conspiracy. "We raid tonight," she said firmly, "before they vanish." Hours later, Mark pulled up to the same corner of Willow Lane, headlights off, heart pounding. Backup units fanned out in silence, boots crunching over snow. Duke stood at the ready, muscles coiled, breath steaming in the icy air. Mark gave a quiet hand signal, and the shepherd surged forward, nose low, weaving through shadows. Duke stopped at a basement door, barking sharply, claws raking the wood. Officers forced it open. The stench of damp concrete and fear hit them first. Then the sound, small voices crying out, muffled, pleading. Flashlights cut through the darkness. 3 children huddled in the corner, bound and shivering. An older boy raised his head, blinking against the light. "Please," he rasped. The team moved fast, freeing restraints, wrapping blankets, carrying them into the freezing night. Mark crouched beside them, his chest tight. "You're safe now. You're going home." But Duke wasn't done. He growled again, this time toward a stack of crates at the back. Officers swept around, pulling them aside, and there he was. The same man from the station, the polished suit now stained with dust, eyes wide with fury. He tried to run, but Duke launched first, a blur of fur and muscle, pinning him to the concrete floor with a force that left no room for resistance. The man screamed, but Mark's cuffs silenced the struggle. By dawn, the house was empty. Children were in safe hands. Evidence filled boxes. And a network that had thrived in shadows was finally torn into the light. Back at the station, Emily waited in the lobby. When she saw Duke, she ran to him, dropping her bear to wrap both arms around his neck. For the first time, her eyes held more hope than fear. Mark knelt beside them, resting a hand on the shepherd's back. "You did it, partner," he whispered. Duke only leaned closer into Emily's embrace. His job not finished, because as long as there were children like her, he would never stop listening to the cries no one else could hear.